Hi, I'm Ryan Selkis. Today on the Unqualified Opinions feed, we bring you a special episode. I had a friendly debate last week at Consensus with Marvin Ammori, the Chief Legal Officer of Uniswap, about the best path forward for crypto in politics. Thanks to Zack Seward for moderating and to Coindesk for sharing this with us. Hope you enjoy.
Hey everybody, I'm Zack Seward. I will be the referee / moderator for this debate. We're going to try to give Karate Combat a run for its money. Hope you guys check that out later tonight. All right, the debate, presidential podium style, features crypto in the 2024 elections. Really crazy time that we are living through these past few weeks. We have Trump aggressively courting the crypto vote. We have the Biden administration softening on key policies. We have House Democrats even voting in support of Fit 21. So really a lot going on. And both these guys, they share the same goal, right? They want to advance crypto policy in the US in a meaningful way, such that builders aren't vilified, such that the industry doesn't go offshore. Where they differ, however, is in the tactical approach to getting that done. And that's what we're going to dig into today here in this debate. All right, you guys ready? That's when you say woo. Give me a woo. There it is. All right, awesome. We're going to start with Marvin. He is a lawyer at Uniswap Labs. He's going to represent the more progressive case. If you could please state your position on how you think crypto can win in DC in 2024. Take it away.
Thank you. And thank you to Ryan for agreeing to debate. We are longtime allies, and it's fun to disagree on exactly one thing, which as I understand it is, should the crypto community exclusively support Trump and the Republicans in this election? That is the debate topic. My point of view is the crypto community should remain nonpartisan or bipartisan, and that is the only way we will have political power that we need in the short term and the long term, so that we have the certainty from government that we need. So that's my point. So I can explain why, and then I'll let Ryan give his point of view. And Ryan's done great work on the Republican side, but I think it's pretty hard to convince Democrats in our community to vote for Trump. It's really hard. It's surprisingly hard to get people to vote for only their economic self-interests. And Democrats learn this all the time. Democrats always wonder why unions sometimes vote for Trump and Republicans, why lower and middle class people sometimes vote for Republicans when this recovery has been primarily led by Biden in those demographics. And when you talk to people, they'll say, money's not everything, right? They're not going to vote just based on money. They also care about issues like abortion or gun rights or something else. So if you want to convince the Democrats in our community to support Trump, they're going to say, well, maybe my bags will go up, but I really care about democracy and I think Trump is a threat to democracy. Or I really care about Roe v. Wade and Trump appointed people who got rid of Roe v. Wade. And so there are a bunch of people who are not going to side with this single issue because they're just Democrats. And then what we're doing is we're pushing those people out of our community, saying they're not welcome. And the long-term ramifications of that is we have a smaller tent, not a bigger tent. We have a politics of subtraction, not addition. And what that leads to is, one, if it becomes purely partisan, every 4 years we'll have a massive pendulum swing one way or the other. We won't have the certainty we want. We've seen this in issue after issue. We've seen this in financial issues. We've seen this in technology issues. What happens is you don't get certainty. You get this political football way back in one direction, way back in another. And then it's also possible that in this election, the Democrats win the House, right? We might need more Democrats. And so one, in the short term, we do need other allies. And yesterday, Ryan and I were at a dinner, and Tom Emmer spoke, and Tom Emmer is the Republican whip. He's the guy who gets all the Republicans to vote for Republican things. And he said, we should keep this nonpartisan. It'll make my job easier. So if the Republicans in Congress are telling us to keep it nonpartisan, I tend to listen to them. And finally, I've spent 20 years doing policy and working mainly on the Democratic side. But Donald Trump has made a campaign promise, kind of a vague campaign promise in favor of crypto. And campaign promises are aspirational, right? They're not worth the paper they're written on, really. Because what ends up happening is they have a whole bunch of different campaign promises. And they show up and they've got to use political will to prioritize those campaign promises and see what can they get done. And even if Donald Trump is elected, and even if Ryan Selkis is the SEC chairman, The people who are still there, who will try to slow down this community, are the banks, right? The banks are the real enemy, not Gary Gensler, not Elizabeth Warren. The banks, we know they're lobbying against us. We know all of their lobbying organizations that spend millions and millions of dollars, right? The banks don't like self-custody because they want all of us custodying our assets with them. It's how they make money. They then lend it out, fractional reserve banking, right? They don't want us to have cheap, fast payments because they make money with expensive payments that are slow because they make money on the day-to-day float. Right? We know the lobbying organizations that spend tens of millions, $30 million. We can name them. We know what their arguments are. And even if the Republicans win, we know they have, imagine all of you are bank lobbyists. You will find a way, right, to stop Ryan, right? And even today, Elizabeth Warren's bill that everyone hates on AML has 2 Republican co-sponsors, right? Graham and Marshall. She's not alone. If you look at the press release on that bill, you have the Bank Policy Institute, a multi-million-dollar organization headed by Jamie Dimon that's massively supporting Elizabeth Warren. So they will do what they can, and even when the Republicans were in power, Steve Mnuchin, very senior in the Trump administration, very anti-crypto, tried to do some of the worst things against crypto. Jay Clayton was the SEC chairman, did a terrible job. And the banks will simply adapt and change. So the real solution is not just bipartisan power. The real solution is we as an industry have to dramatically up-level our game, right? The Blockchain Association is doing great work, massively underfunded. DeFi Education Fund, massively underfunded, right? When you think about who our opponents are and the kind of long-term strategy we need to win, we need to make sure that we up-level across everything. We now have a super PAC, we now have a grassroots organization with Stand With Crypto doing a great job, but we don't have a PAC strategy. Our advocates are under financed, our lobbyists are under financed. So that's sort of the broad picture, bipartisan and really up-level our power rather than simply trust in the campaign promises of a president that might not be able to effectuate those promises unless we up-level. Off to you, Ryan.
Well, I want to thank Marvin for agreeing to be a victim up here today. I agree with some of what Marvin said, and there's really 3 levels to this game that I want to try to unpack at different parts of the conversation. One is the current political debate in DC, FIT 21, SAB 121, what should policy look like this year? The second actually is going to tie directly to all of the misinformation that I think Marvin just shared, which is not because he's gullible or that he's dishonest, but you have to understand that there is a meta game in Washington, D.C., where people like Marvin that have great progressive relationships are going to intentionally whitewash or soften the reality so that they can go and they can continue to lobby and can continue to get outcomes with that party. That's fine, that's part of the game. That's why Marvin and I get along so well. The third part of the game is the electoral politics and what are the consequences going to be for the Democrats' obstructionist mentality towards crypto for the last 3.5 years. And I want to make one thing clear. 100% of the outcomes from this past month, the ETH ETF, SAB 121 getting 60 votes instead of 51. FIT 21 getting 71 Democrat votes instead of 20 to 30. Marty Gruenberg resigning despite Elizabeth Warren trying to carry water for him. Gary Gensler being under all-out attack and probably being forced to resign is a result of one person, and that's President Trump. You can disagree, that's fine, but you don't have as much information as I do. The second most important person here is Majority Whip Emmer, because he is the one that put this entire thing into motion in terms of how he introduced these bills in Congress that effectively checkmated the Democrats. The third most important person is Senator Lummis, also a Republican of Lummis-Gillibrand. The fourth most important people are Representative McHenry and Representative French Hill that advanced the FIT 21 bill through Congress. The fifth most important person, I would say, is probably crypto Twitter, or Vivek Ramaswamy, somewhere 5, 6. You have to go down to number 12, in my opinion, to get to a Democrat, which is Senator Gillibrand. And don't get me wrong, she is excellent on this issue. But she is very much on an island, and the thing that has moved the Democrats has not been a sudden change of heart or epiphany or come to Jesus moment. It has been raw political power and an understanding that there are going to be severe consequences this election because of how unfair they have been the last 3.5 years, the bad faith, the out of control bastardization of American values and civil liberties, and there's going to be consequences for that. And frankly, it's not my problem, it's not Republicans' problem, it's not President Trump's problem that the Democrats have been so offsides on this issue for so long because they have a guilty conscience. They took a lot of money and a lot of support from Sam Bankman-Fried. I didn't like the son of a bitch either. He did a lot of damage to us. So I want you to understand that when you think about the softening of the Democrats right now, there was a Block article yesterday, probably planted from some progressive policy folks that are trying to get in with the White House, saying that the White House has suddenly found the reason to engage with the industry. I wonder what could have happened in the last 2 to 3 weeks that would have made that happen. So I would suggest that if this White House is serious, if this Democrat Party is serious about a change of heart on crypto, then they can repeal SAB 121. Easy thing for the president to sign the repeal because there's a bipartisan majority that has done it. They should fast track FDIC Chair Marty Gruenberg's resignation. They should ask for Gary Gensler's resignation. They should immediately put out an executive order that ends choke points, which is an unconstitutional and overreaching regulatory attack on the industry to unbank us. They should drop the charges against Roman Storm. They should free Ross Ulbricht. And ultimately, they should drop all the SEC cases that are bullshit against the good faith actors in this industry. So I'm happy to go blow by blow on all of that over the next 15 minutes, and more if we have time, if anyone else wants to yield.
Ooh, I like it. All right, so let's take it. Thank you for those statements. Fantastic. Let's take a step back, right, and understand a bit more about the context of how things work in DC and how your views on that may differ, right? I think Selkis is arguing that Trump's actions have put the Democrats on the defensive, rather than them over time coming to that position by their own accord. Do you disagree with that statement?
I disagree with the way the question was asked. I want to go through what Ryan said was 100% of the things that happened were because of Trump. And that's not true. I think what's happening is finally the crypto community is deploying some of the weapons that you would need to deploy in order to win in DC, right? So Ryan said that essentially I have an incentive to make sure that I get a voice in progressive politics. Ryan isn't a single issue voter. Ryan is a Republican. And I love Ryan for it.
Not true.
But what?
Not true.
Oh, you're not a Republican?
I'm very socially liberal.
Why do you call me a lib?
What's that?
I've never been called a lib before except for by a Republican.
Well, that was just to pump up this debate.
Okay, got it. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm glad to know that you are socially liberal. Okay, so I don't know if you guys remember the 1980s commercial with Spike Lee and Michael Jordan, where Michael Jordan is dunking nonstop and Spike Lee keeps saying, it's gotta be the shoes. And Michael Jordan's like, it's not the shoes. Right? Michael Jordan can shoot and he can run and he can pass. And he started winning championships once he got a big man on his team and a small forward, and everything was built out a bit. And when I hear Ryan saying Trump did all of this, it sounds to me like it's got to be the shoes, right? It's helpful, at least we're not slipping, but what we deployed to win across all these things was far broader than Trump. So let's begin with SAB 121. So this was an accounting bulletin by Gary Gensler. Gary Gensler is a master of like screwing people over with minor little accounting changes. And the way a bank would have held crypto assets on their books would have been too expensive to do it. So the banks didn't like this. The banks wanted to get rid of this accounting bulletin. And Congress can reverse an SEC rule. And Democrats will almost never reverse the rule of a Democratic chairman. And instead what happened, to everyone's shock, was Biden threatened to veto the repeal of this rule, and 12 Democratic senators voted to repeal it. Right? That was a seismic shock to people. Now, if you look at who voted for that, they weren't people who care all that much about Trump versus Biden. You had Gary Peters, and this is kind of inside baseball, but he's the guy in the Senate in charge of electing other senators this year. And then there were 3 senators who are close races who are worried about losing, who all voted as well. And then you had Chuck Schumer, who traditionally will take a tough vote so that other people on his party can go along with the tough vote. So all of these people are playing pure Senate politics. They're not playing Trump politics. They're worried about their own job, all right? The same way Ryan accused me of being worried about my job, right? They're worried about their own job, not about Biden, Trump. And you can see that in who was elected. And why did they care so much about their own job? They cared because we finally deployed a tool, right? One of our allies, one of our buddies, right? Which is Fairshake, which is a super PAC, which spent a bunch of money and crushed a Warren acolyte in California. And now people have notice. They have $100 million to spend. It's not just a vague Trump campaign promise. It is $100 million that could be spent in Senate races, right? That's something we never had before. We had $10 million a few years ago run by SBF. And let me tell you about Fit 21. Fit 21.
I feel like I'm getting filibustered.
Oh yeah, Fit 21 was also, because I've got to explain the nuance. You just said it's got to be the shoes. Fit 21 was a lot of hard work by a lot of Democrats in our coalition. You know them. They busted their butt the same way you must have busted your butt to get in front of Trump and to convince Trump to be pro-crypto.
Which is why it's a flawed bill.
They worked so hard, might be flawed, but it was a massive victory for crypto, right? And so I think we need all the tools, and we're starting to see all those tools being used. It's not just Trump, and if we misdiagnose the solution, then we're going to just think we can just waltz in with the new administration and win when we can't.
Well, I think I agree with you, Marvin. I mean, I couldn't have put it better myself. You know, Trump is Michael Jordan and fair shake Scottie Pippen. I guess that makes me Dennis Rodman, which is fitting. So, you know, yes, there's multiple tools in the arsenal, but the spark for this entire fire, the trigger event for this entire cascade of positive events was presidential power and presidential campaign power. And yes, I don't think it would have been nearly as effective if we hadn't spent the last few years getting our shit together. And that's been both of us. That's been a lot of people on both left, right, and center libertarians, which I would consider myself more libertarian versus Republican. And I think that was a precondition to actually get this in motion. I don't think that you get to the level of presidential politics if we didn't have all that in place. So I do agree with that. But I think the disagreement that you're going to start to see highlighted is whether we should let Democrats off the hook in the next 6 months. The answer is unequivocally no. We can talk about nonpartisanship, we can talk about bipartisanship, we can talk about crossing the aisle after there has been a certain period of penance from the Democrats. And right now, I think on the House side, there's going to be good crypto Dems, there's going to be good crypto Republicans, and everywhere in between. And I think we want to continue to invest in those relationships and continue to engage with folks on the House side. On the Senate side, I think Marvin just proved my point. They're worried about their jobs as well. They should be. And fair shake is a bazooka that is aimed at the swing state races in the Senate that are ultimately going to flip the Senate to be Republican this fall. They're not playing to get Democrats in. They're not playing for the incumbents. This is the first time we've had a super PAC that has directly targeted incumbents. We're coming after John Tester, Jackie Rosen, Sherrod Brown, probably even going for the Maryland seat because we have a good candidate in Governor Hogan in Maryland, my state, so I'm going to try to help them there too. And ultimately, I think the goal is to get 5 or 6 Senate seats swung, not just 1 or 2. But it's only going to take 1 or 2. That's the good news for crypto because that is the catalyst that knocks Elizabeth Warren out of the majority in Senate banking. That is what puts Sherrod Brown down a peg into the ranking member on the Senate Banking Committee. And a lot of people in this room don't understand this nuance. But there are not equal votes in the House of Representatives. There are not equal votes in the Senate. There is a power dynamic in these chambers, and it's led by the leadership of both conferences, and it's led by the committee chair's leadership in every single committee. And those are the things that we're ultimately playing for when you think about swinging the Senate and swinging some of the powerful people in both the House and the Senate so that we're actually rejiggering what these committees look like.
I guess my next question, I want to go back to, you brought up sort of that idea of campaign promises being hollow. Would you agree that the real prize, I think as you're articulating now, is the congressional, focusing on the congressional races? Or do you think that it's really the power resides in the executive, who we get in the presidential election in November that matters? Marvin, I'll toss that to you first for your thoughts.
Yeah, so just to clarify, fair shake is not purely Republican, right? They play in Democratic races, they play on both sides, and they did play in the Adam Schiff race. So my tendency here tends to be, if we want great crypto policy, right, it matters to elect people who are pro-crypto, right? And that's across the board, but we don't need to make this a partisan issue where we supporting Trump as an industry or supporting Biden as an industry will make this partisan, right? And so the question is really, should we all support Trump or should we support whoever we feel like supporting? And so I say to you, support whoever you feel like supporting, because the real battle will be with once people are elected, once people are given their assignments and their positions within these committees, right? That's when the battle begins. And we talk about campaign promises. I spent a decade working on network neutrality. I was one of the main net neutrality lawyers. And in 2008, that's how old I am, Barack Obama promised that he would do net neutrality. His major promise, went to Silicon Valley, he raised all this money against Hillary Clinton, Silicon Valley, promising to do net neutrality. And once he was elected, you know what? The telecom companies and the cable companies and their massive lobbying armies were still there. Try to do a roundtable, they would harass the staffer, they would call his boss, they try to get him fired. Like, they are very aggressive, very effective. The kinds of tools they have at their disposal will not go away if Trump is elected or Biden is elected. So you can all, work hard. He can work hard with his Republican connections. Those of us who are Democrats can work hard with our Democratic connections. But what we really need to do is make sure we up-level our game in order to win with either of them. We will lose. We'll have Mnuchin and Clayton like we did under Trump the first time, or we'll have Gensler and others like we do now if we can't fight back. And we're seeing the benefits of fighting back, the benefits of having a super PAC, the benefits of actually engaging in DC as we did during FIT 21. So my point is, we don't necessarily want to be bipartisan, because then we'll be set back in the long term, right? It's Gary Gensler who's trying to make it partisan. It's Tom Emmer who's trying to make it bipartisan. And I think that's because Tom Emmer wants us to win and Gary Gensler wants us to lose.
Gotcha. Selkis, I'll throw it to you for the last few minutes here. Either on the topic of campaign promises, whether you feel that Trump will be better this time around should he re-win the presidency, or if you have other thoughts on what Marvin just said.
Well, I mean, I think there's a saying in DC, personnel is policy. And so I agree with Marvin that ultimately it comes down to the personnel, but you need to understand who's actually pulling the strings when it comes to personnel. And I want to address the criticism of President Trump's prior administration, because there was essentially two regulators that you could argue were offsides, and I would certainly argue, and I was critical of Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary at the time, when he tried to shank us on the way out the door. So I want to address him and Jay Clayton, who was the SEC chair under Trump. But then I also want to point out that every single financial regulator under President Biden is anti-crypto, because the reason that President Biden was elected is because he made a devil's bargain with Elizabeth Warren, who has spent the last couple of years recruiting a quote-unquote campaign ad anti-crypto army. Every single person, whether it's at the SEC, senior folks in the Treasury Department, FDIC, OCC, you name it, the financial regulators essentially work for President Warren. I don't think Joe Biden's all home, quite frankly. It's being kind of governed by the administrative state. But that's even more dangerous, and it proves my point, because Elizabeth Warren is ultimately at the helm of a lot of these financial regulators. That's just the reality. You contrast that with past and present potential frontrunners for cabinet positions under a Trump administration. We had Brian Brooks. We had Chris Giancarlo. We had Hester Peirce. Chris Giancarlo and Hester Peirce were literally called crypto mom and crypto dad, people, okay? So if we want to do apples to apples here, we were talking about high school basketball, of which I wasn't that good, but there's a saying in basketball, ball don't lie, okay? And ball doesn't lie in this case in terms of who's going to be a better administration, especially since this Republican Party is moving more libertarian. So there's two people that always come up, Jay Clayton and Steve Mnuchin. I want to address both of them. So first of all, Jay Clayton was the SEC chair from 2017 to 2020, and that happened to be the period of time when there was essentially Bitcoin and ICO pump and dumps. DeFi summer didn't happen until mid-2020. There was no real applications outside of Bitcoin. Stablecoins barely existed when he was the SEC chair. So I actually think that it's somewhat fair for the SEC in that administration to have been a little bit skeptical about whether we were going to make it or not. You also have to look at the fact that crypto went from $13 billion to $1 trillion in market cap under the first administration. After Joe Biden's first 100 days, we flatlined until Trump came out at Mar-a-Lago, cold called me on stage, and this became a presidential campaign issue. And now it's gone up about $500 billion. So that could be a $1 trillion handshake, which I appreciate Balaji for putting out into the Twitter sphere. And it's true, right? And I think that's going to continue to happen if we see another presidential administration run by President Trump instead of Joe Biden. I don't think that there's really much of a debate about this. But I want to close with something really important, because I know I'm going hard on him. That's the design here. It's supposed to be a debate. But I truly respect Marvin. I truly respect Sheila Warren, V from Anchorage. There's dozens of people on the progressive side that I've worked with, and I think are good faith. They're thinking about this the right way. They're playing the game in the right long term, the meta game in the right long term way. No debate there whatsoever. But we're talking about you right now, and how you're going to act over the course of the next 6 months, and who you're going to take seriously as a presidential candidate or as potential swing votes in the Senate. And I have to tell you, the Democrats right now are like a cheating spouse. We've caught them with their pants down. We've caught them with their pants down. I'm sorry, baby, I'm a changed man. That's fine. But you know what? It's going to take more than 6 months to forgive there, and I would like to see some actual effort on the part of these Democrats before we just carte blanche say, it's okay, come on back. I think that is reasonable. Not only do I think that's reasonable, but I think to do otherwise and to reward this Democrat mainstream party at this point in time is not only foolish, but I think it shows a profound lack of self-respect, and we shouldn't be respected if we're going to let them off the hook this easily.
Can I disagree and agree real quick?
We unfortunately have to leave it. If you could quickly disagree, I will give you the last word.
Yeah, I mean, the CFTC chairman today, Ross Benham, who you forgot to mention, has been very pro-crypto. So even in this administration,
Dow.
I mean, we're just comparing apples to apples. But what I will agree with Ryan on is that the Democrats do have to earn back a bit, right? Having 3 years of like the disastrous policy of Gary Gensler and Elizabeth Warren running amok, they have to do something a bit more than what they've done so far. So doesn't mean that we can't all vote our conscience, we can't all support and keep working on the parties we care about, but I do think the Democrats still have a little more penance to do that they could do in the next few months.
Nice. We'll leave it there. Lots to watch these next few months.
Brother, fun time.
Thanks for duking it out, guys, and thanks for being here this morning. Have a great day. Thank you.